Good afternoon, welcome to This Week in Turkey. With 16 days remaining until Istanbul's critical redo mayoral vote, candidates of the ruling and opposition parties are touring different parts of Anatolia to attract voters of different backgrounds. Main opposition Republican People's Party, CHP's mayoral candidate for Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu, toured his hometown of Trabzon and other cities in the Black Sea region this week.
The main opposition candidate for mayor of Istanbul, Ekrem İmamoğlu, was greeted by crowds of thousands on Wednesday in his hometown of Trabzon, where he toured the city to celebrate the Eid al-Fitr holiday. He went on to give separate rallies at nearby Black Sea cities on Wednesday nights. The opposition candidate urged Trabzon natives who were visiting their families from their permanent homes in Istanbul to return for the vote later this month and asked Trabzon locals to call friends and acquaintances in Istanbul and talk to them about the poll. He went on to give a speech to a packed and excited crowd in the nearby city of Ordu, addressing the crowd in the rousing manner that has become his trademark. During the rally, İmamoğlu also slammed pro-government outlets and ruling party supporters for calling him Pontic Greek. The AKP and his supporters had taken to labeling İmamoğlu as a Pontic Greek after the Greek newspaper Ethnos last month described the politician as the Pontic who took Istanbul from Erdogan. The Greek daily was referring to İmamoğlu's birthplace of Trabzon, which for centuries was part of Pontus and home to an ethnic Greek group. Tevfik Göksu, the mayor of Istanbul's conservative Esenler district, was the first AKP politician to imply that İmamoğlu had Pontic roots, a slur to many Turkish nationalists. The reference has become so widespread that nearly all critical comments on social media against the politician include the word Pontus. Ali Kopuz, the deputy head of the Union of Chambers and Commodity Exchanges of Turkey, said on Tuesday that a group that protested Interior Minister Süleyman Soylu in Istanbul had Pontic roots like İmamoğlu. They cannot find anything else. They waste their time with Ekrem's beliefs, ethnic identity. My brothers, everybody living in the city knows my family. You cannot insult someone over ethnic identity, İmamoğlu said.
The ruling Justice and Development Party, AKP's mayoral candidate for Istanbul, Binali Yıldırım, was in Sivas and Diyarbakır to hold rallies this week. Yıldırım greeted his supporters with Kurdish words.
Binali Yıldırım, the mayoral candidate of the People's Alliance for Istanbul, visited the predominantly Kurdish city of Diyarbakır, calling on people to support him during the redo local elections in Istanbul on June 23rd. I have come to Diyarbakır to request your support. Diyarbakır has always been on our side. God willing, they will be on our side again this time. No one will be able to leave a space between us, he said on Thursday, speaking to AKP supporters in the city. He sent celebratory wishes, Eid al-Fitr, and greeted people in the Kurdish language. The reason for being in Diyarbakır is to exchange Eid congratulations, see you face to face once again, and seek your support, he said. He claimed there is another Eid waiting for Turkey, Eid of Istanbul on June 23rd, referring to his potential victory in the province. There are 1 million Kurdish voters in Istanbul, according to the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party HDP, who had indirectly called on its supporters in Istanbul, Ankara, and Izmir to vote for the CHP on March 31st. Yıldırım told his supporters in Diyarbakır that during the independence war in the 1920s, the founder of modern Turkey, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, invited deputies to the Grand National Assembly meeting in Ankara, including the representatives of Kurdistan, Lazistan, and throughout Anatolia. However, the usage of the term Kurdistan has been banned in Turkey due to its separatist connotations with the government. According to Burada, Yıldırım shared a video of his speech in Diyarbakır on Twitter, but removed the portion about Kurdistan.
In a speech this week, the leader of the MHP, the Nationalist Movement Party, Devlet Bahçeli, said that the June 23rd redo mayoral election in Istanbul should be held without opening the Supreme Election Board YSK's decisions up for discussion.
The upcoming June 23rd Istanbul mayoral election should be held without opening up for discussion recent decisions by the Supreme Election Board YSK, said Devlet Bahçeli, leader of the Nationalist Movement Party MHP, on June 4th. Such behavior is difficult to understand, Bahçeli told reporters. We have to realize these June 23rd elections without putting the YSK decisions so far in extreme debate, he noted. His comments concerned the latest YSK decision, which paves the way for heads of district election boards and directors who are subject to investigation over March 31st local polls to assume duty in June 23rd elections. Bahçeli said, whatever the outcome of this election, they should be considered as an important step in terms of shaping the future of Turkey. The structural reforms that have been initiated now should be carried out in line with the presidential government system goals for 2023, he said, noting that these goals should be practiced by the political parties under review and discussions of intellectuals. Elaborating on the same issue, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said there is a misunderstanding and the case is not certain yet. The ruling Justice and Development Party, AKP, has submitted its objection to this decision, he told reporters on June 4th. The issue has nothing about the balloting committees. It's about election boards, and the YSK will rule taking account the AKP's objection, he said, noting that the YSK is not the authority responsible for judges. The High Council of Judges and Prosecutors is responsible for the judges, he recalled. Millions of Turkish voters cast their votes nationwide on March 31st in local elections to choose mayors, city council members, and other officials. In the Istanbul mayor's election, AKP candidate Binali Yıldırım lost against the main opposition Republican People's Party (CHP) candidate Ekrem İmamoğlu, trailing by around 13,000 votes behind his rival in the local elections on March 31st. The AKP and its ally MHP appealed to the YSK, seeking the annulment and renewal of the election, arguing that there was fraud and severe irregularities that impacted the election results. The YSK accepted the appeal and annulled the March 31st municipal election in Istanbul on the grounds that ineligible officers and poll workers, who are supposed to be civil servants according to Turkish law, served during the elections. The YSK also decided to file a criminal complaint against the chair and members of the district election boards, election managers, and other persons responsible for appointing poll workers unlawfully.
Joining us via Skype now to comment on the latest regarding the growing tension between Ankara and Washington over Turkey's purchase of the Russian S-400 air defense system is Faruk Loğoğlu, who is Turkey's former ambassador to Washington, D.C. Good afternoon, Mr. Loğoğlu. Good to have you again at This Week in Turkey.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
So, Mr. Loğoğlu, as you have followed yourself very closely, the U.S. seems pretty adamant that Turkey must drop its purchase of the Russian S-400 missile defense systems if it wants to stay in the F-35 program. And a recent report that came hours ago, in fact, from Washington, says that the U.S. will stop accepting any additional Turkish pilots to be trained on its F-35 fighter jets, and that the current students must leave the U.S. by July 31st. So my first question to you is, how serious of a threshold do you think this is in the ongoing crisis between the U.S. and Turkey?
Look, I think the problem is a serious one for sure. But I think what the two sides are doing at the present time is to protect and to maintain their known positions. The Turkish position is that the S-400 deal is a done deal and there is no turning back. The American position is that Turkey must choose between S-400 or F-35, that Turkey cannot have both. So this is ultimately their current their ultimate positions, and that's what they are maintaining at the moment. The latest news coming from Washington about no additional pilots for F-35s to be trained is really a detail. I don't regard it as a very important announcement, because increasingly the S-400 F-35 question has long been not a military, not a defense question, but a political issue between the two allies. So I think we would be better off to understand and to decipher what is happening and what might happen in the near future if we look at this question as a political issue rather than a military one.
Mr. Loğoğlu, as you know, Istanbul, the main economic hub of the country, is holding a very critical mayoral vote on June 23rd, a redo election, actually. And although this seems like a domestic matter, some analysts see a connection between this election and Washington's most recent moves in terms of timing. And how would you put all of this into perspective?
I think the connection exists for both sides. That is, Turkey is probably not going to take any more concrete steps regarding the delivery of S-400 missiles until after the elections. And I think the same applies to the American side. That is to say, Americans will refrain from taking any major step either in the Congress or in the administration to put Turkey into a corner over this issue. I think they too will wait for the outcome of the Istanbul municipal elections on the 23rd of June. The reason why I say that is because Turkey needs the U.S. For a variety of reasons, but mostly for economic reasons. Turkish economy is in bad shape. No matter what happens in the Istanbul elections, Turkish economy will still be in bad shape. And for this reason, Turkey will need the goodwill of the U.S., whether in the bilateral sense or in the context of American influence over the world financial system, but especially in the IMF, International Monetary Fund. That is probably the address which Turkey will have to eventually go to really deal with the structural problems facing Turkish economy. So this is for mostly economic and financial reasons. Turkey needs the goodwill of the U.S. Then what about the U.S.? Does the U.S. need Turkey? Yes, of course. That is why I feel that whatever is going to happen on this S-400 issue will happen after the municipal elections in Istanbul on the 23rd of June. And why does America need Turkey? Well, in Syria, in Iraq, over Iran, in relation with Russia. I think the U.S., let alone NATO, will certainly not want to push Turkey into Russian arms over the S-400 issue, because that will weaken NATO, that will make Russia stronger, and that is probably an outcome which President Trump would like to avoid. So there are good reasons for on both sides of the fence, the Turkish and American, not to really turn the S-400 issue into one that will rupture, that will break down the Turkish-American relationship. Mm-hmm. And this, I think, leads me to conclude that eventually, after the elections in Istanbul, that some resolution to the S-400 issue will be found with the United States. It's not going to be easy, and it's not going to be tasteful, especially for Turkey. Mm-hmm. But I think at the end of the day, there will be a solution of some kind. I don't know exactly what, but there will be a solution that will push the S-400 issue to the outside of the Turkish-American agenda.
Mm-hmm. Finally, Mr. Loğoğlu, let's try to make sense of what kind of a solution this will be, the solution that you were just talking about seconds ago. The recent developments have shown us that Washington is pretty determined, stubborn even, in its position, yet, just like you've laid out in your previous response, Turkey needs the US for a variety of reasons, the most important one of them perhaps being economic reasons. So in a setting as such, would you say that Turkey is likely to drop its purchase of the S-400 systems following the municipal elections in Istanbul?
I think that's a possibility. I don't know if there is what the Turkish government has in mind, but I think we have to emphasize another point, which is that the cancellation of the agreement with Russia over S-400 missiles is not going to be such a big deal for Russia. I mean, they are not going to make a big fuss of this because Russia wants to keep Turkey on its side, not just because of the sale of S-400 missiles, but for as a partner, economic partner, tourism partner, as a partner in construction, as a partner in the nuclear energy field, as a partner in the Black Sea region, because the Black Sea region is also an area where NATO and Russia are going to really come into possible confrontations in the near future. So if at the end of the day, Turkey decides as an option to cancel the S-400 deal, it's not going to be such a big problem for Russia. I don't know if that would be the best option for Turkey. The other options would be paying for the S-400s, taking delivery of them, but putting them in storage and not using them. But I think there is something cooking in the works. I recall the visit by the economy and finance minister of Turkey, Berat Albayrak, to Washington. And if you remember that photograph in the Oval Office with President Trump sitting at the desk and with Berat Albayrak sitting in front among two American officials, the Treasury Secretary and Trump's son-in-law, he said after that meeting, Mr. Albayrak, the Turkish minister, said that he got good feelings from Trump about all the issues that they discussed. I have a feeling that the Turkish minister gave some initial indications of the intentions of the Turkish government, especially of President Erdogan, about this issue. And soon afterwards, we saw another development with the release of an American citizen of Turkish origin working at the National Space Agency. This too, I think, indicates that there is an effort, there's a mutual effort to really downplay the S-400 issue toward a mutually acceptable solution of some sort.
Mr. Loğoğlu, thank you very much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
This week we were joined by Faruk Loğoğlu, Turkey's former ambassador to Washington, D.C., and he commented on the ongoing and escalating tension between Ankara and Washington over Turkey's purchase of the Russian S-400 air missile defense systems. And now we'll continue with our next news video. The US-based watchdog Freedom House released its Freedom and the Media 2019 report on Wednesday. The report cites Mediascope TV as an important buffer against censorial tendencies by governments.
A new report by Freedom House finds that leaders are using new methods for repressing independent journalism around the world. The United States-based watchdog released its Freedom and the Media 2019 report on Wednesday. The report says that both in Central Europe and elsewhere, the press is suffering from a crisis of trust and the crisis of the old business model. The growing prominence of fake news and disinformation has further fed into the political polarization, contributing to a cycle of decreasing trust. In the United States, fewer than half the population say they trust the media. The figure is around 1/3 in Italy and the United Kingdom, and only 1/4 in Turkey or Russia. According to the report, while many local governments are clearly intolerant of an unfettered online news sector, major international technology platforms serve as an important buffer against such censorial tendencies. The report cites Turkey's Medyascope as an example of outlets that are directly utilizing social media to distribute news and commentary. The report also highlights that in countries facing drastic and sudden declines in press freedom, the internet can be an important readout. According to the data shared in the report, almost 150 news outlets have been closed in Turkey since the 2016 coup attempt, with hundreds of journalists facing spurious charges of supporting terrorism.
That's all from This Week in Turkey. Thanks for tuning in and hope to see you again next Friday at 5 p.m. Goodbye.